So we finished up Archive 81 yesterday. Took us a little longer than I was expecting, but life life happens.
Yeah.
And I think the show came out a whole whopping 5 days ago. So I apologize
For being late.
for 5 whole days to watch an entire season of a show, but we watch other stuff too. Anyway, so this show is currently streaming on Netflix, and I think developed by Rebecca Sunshine, who, let's see here. She's worked on The Boys, which is really cool, and Outcast, but I think she's the creator. But the series is directed by Rebecca Thomas. She did 4 episodes, and she is the director of the show Limetown with Jessica Biel, which is a Facebook show that I never watched, but I always wanted to. But 2 of these episodes is directed by Benson and Moorhead from, they've done a few movies now which are pretty well regarded in the horror community, but I don't think you've seen anything they've done.
What are they?
The Endless, or Spring, or Resolution, or their newest one was with Anthony Mackie and Synchronicity.
Nope.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of those.
They're all good. But anyways, so what this show is about, the Benson and Moorhead thing was the thing that got me the most excited about this. Just seeing that they had involvement in this was like, oh wow, they took some time to do some TV episodes. And then it was being promoted as found footage, and while technically that's accurate, it's definitely not what you would think when it comes to found footage. It's found footage more like that movie Evidence, where there's this video archivist or restoration guy that is hired by this bigwig to restore these tapes that were found in an apartment fire from 1994. And it's current day, and he's brought into this facility because he says the tapes are in this condition and they can't be moved from the facility, so you're going to have to come out to this place and you're going to be alone in this remote location where there's no cell phone service, set up for every horror thing ever created.
Isolated.
And while he's there, he starts to restore these tapes, and while he's restoring them, he's watching them. So that's the found footage. So this is filmed all like a normal show, but then he's watching the footage, but we're not watching the footage as much as we're seeing the events unfold within the footage that he's watching, but not through the footage he's watching. So as far as the actual rough handheld found footage aspect of this show, I'd say it's probably 2% of the entire show. It's very, very minimal, but it is technically found footage from a fire.
Right.
But it is not found footage like a Paranormal Activity movie or something.
No, it's
which
not.
is what I thought this show was going to be. I thought this thing was going to be tapes they found, and it was going to be here's tape 1. Episode 1 is tape 1. Episode 2 is tape 2, and so on.
Yeah.
And that is definitely not what this show was. I also expected this show to be more horror and less psychological thriller, which is really more of what it is. It's a drama, psychological thriller, and I would put horror as third. If I was to categorize them, by the amount of time spent on each genre. But anyways, back to the synopsis. He's restoring these tapes, and this young woman is she's video documenting her time at this apartment complex called the Visser, and she is trying to locate her mother, who she's estranged from. And while she's there, she uncovers a cult and is documenting that while she is there. And in modern day, our main character who's restoring the tapes starts to feel like he's connected to her, and he starts to find out things within the tapes that, were very unexpected to him.
Yeah.
And this, makes him go down the rabbit hole trying to figure out what the hell, why he was chosen, what's going on in these tapes, and so on. So it's a show that, it's kind of like Yellow Jackets in that it is, half told in the present day and half told in the past. And we're jumping back and forth throughout every episode between these two time periods. And I will say, as far as my opinion of the show, is that it wasn't until about episode 5 that I really got interested. The first 4 episodes, I really liked the first episode, and I was really intrigued by it. It was like, oh, I hope this holds up. Then episode 2, 3, and 4 felt like episode 1 repeated over and over. I felt like I watched the first episode felt like the next 3 episodes to me on loop. Like, it was just him restoring the tapes, her talking, and then it going back and forth. It did the exact same thing to me every episode. Then in episode 5, this is where or was it episode 4? Episode 4. The end of episode 4. Mm-hmm. And then episode 5. So the end of episode 4, and then another part in 5. There was 2 like really shocking moments that happened, and that really got me like, oh, okay, cool. This is going more horror. And then it just kind of slowed itself down again. And I very much expected this show to be a one and done, completely rounded finale done story, and it isn't at all. Definitely meant to be left open for a season 2, which isn't a bad thing. No. I was just expecting this to be like a mini series kind of thing. I think the performances are good. I think that it's well shot and well done. I would say I'm a little above middle of the road. Kind of like if I had to make a rating kind of thing, it'd be like in that 7, 7.5 area. Mm-hmm. So it fell flat for me in a lot of areas where I just felt like it was repetitive, redundant. Like I didn't feel like we were going anywhere. A lot of dream sequences, a lot of dream sequences. So then that, is kind of a pet peeve of mine. So
yeah, I really like this show. I see what you're saying about the horror label, but I found that the horror was pretty I think it was more of a cosmic horror, I guess, a mild cosmic horror with what was happening, and I really liked it. I like the slow build of everything. For me, it didn't feel too draggy at times. And even those episodes like 2, 3, and most of 4, I feel like even though they might imitate each other, it was a lot of character development and kind of getting to know the characters and just building the mystery, really. At least that's what it was for me. But I'm a big fan of the eerie, subtly eerie, dealing with some time travel and other dimensions, and it felt like an episode of Twilight Zone in some ways. And I love the music. I think the music was really great. It definitely is memorable for me. And even just the opening of each episode, they do a really cool segment at the beginning of each episode with old VHS footage that relates to the apartment or, the situation in general. And I like all of that. So, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I was happy with everything. I would have liked there to be maybe more of, what happens at the end of episode 4 and in episode 5. I think that would have, upped it for me. But at the same time, I like what they did with it overall. And I agree. I think the acting is great. I would definitely be interested in watching a season 2. But, with where we left off, I see like kind of where they would go with it, but it's a very short story. I don't see like the overarching plot that they would continue with.
Yeah.
I just see like this one main goal that they could focus on, but that's not as compelling to me as, the entire storyline of this season.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it needs another episode or 2 to close this out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think that this just felt like it ended an episode or 2 before it should have. Mm-hmm. Even though I think this should have been, from what I saw of it, I feel like I could have done with 2 less episodes. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a lot of redundancies that could be, cut, and we'd still feel the same amount of connection and character development. So I do feel like it's a little bloated in certain areas, and I'm not usually one who makes that claim. I'm always the guy that's like, no, like the runtime was fine or whatever. I'm not usually the guy like, oh, it's everything. This is too long. This is too long. I have a friend like that, Christian, who came on our show, our live stream. He says that about every fucking movie he ever watches. Every fucking movie he ever reviews. He's like, I feel like we could have trimmed 15 minutes here or something. And I'm like, oh, shut the fuck up. You say that about everything. I rarely say that, but with this one, I definitely feel like this could have been 6 episodes, but then add 2 episodes at the end of it and make it 8 episodes like it is, but complete it. Right? Mm-hmm. 2 more episodes I feel like would have finished this up. Where they leave off, I feel like they have maybe 1 or 2 episodes to finish it and close off what they did not do. Now, will they stretch that out in a second season to 8 more episodes? Of course, if it gets renewed.
Yeah.
I think it will, but...
I do too, and I think, the main thing that they can focus on, you're right, they could finish it in 1 to 2 episodes, but I think that now that we're talking about it, I feel like there actually is another way that they could go with exploring maybe different stories that are connected to the same, general premise of what's going on, but new tapes, for example, or new footage, or, whatever media they decide to focus on. But I don't know. I would have been fine if it was the way you described, like if we cut the couple episodes and then added 2 more. But as it is, I'm okay with how everything ran.
Well, with how it ends, they could definitely have new tapes.
Yes.
But we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, my biggest gripe with the show is the lack of in-your-face horror. It's a little too subtle. I'm fine with subtle horror that eerily builds and builds upon itself. The haunting, Hill House. Yeah. Hill House is a good example of really slow burn, character driven.
But there's climax in that too. The beginning is the slow burn, and then I feel like the end of that show is very heavy with,
But even
horror.
Even just breaking it up with the bent neck lady endings and stuff like that, which we kind of get 2 of in this, but they're very short lived. Uh-huh. And I just would have liked, as I said, more in your face horror elements. There's this entity that keeps showing up in the television, and I found that to be mostly cheesy.
Did you?
I didn't really like it very much. It was pretty much the same thing every time. It was just this distorted face in the screen. It just felt CG and kind of lame, and I was just is that ever going to become anything? Not really.
It kind of does at the end.
Barely.
Yeah, but there's a reason for why it appears like that, and it's, it makes sense with the plot of the story.
But I don't care, right? Things can make sense, but you're still not going to like it.
No, right? That's fine. I'm just saying that there's a reason for it. It's not out of place. They're not giving you more.
There should be more horror. There should be more death. right? Like there's very, very little death going on in here. I feel like the cult should be way more intimidating, right? But I get it. For the story they're telling, it doesn't match up with it. So, because even episode 7 of 8, is completely in the past, right? We're not even dealing with anything in the present almost at all. It's like 95% in many, many years previously, which is fine. I mean, that's backstory, but I get, and I agree, it is more cosmic, but I look at other cosmic horror things that we've watched, and I mean, look at The Void.
Sure.
I mean, The Void is very cosmic horror, but that is horror the entire time. And this just, it doesn't feel like, I don't know, there is an atmosphere to it.
Absolutely.
But it's a dull atmosphere most of the time for me.
I didn't find it dull at all. I really enjoy the atmosphere. I feel like it's a very, like, I mean, like we've been saying, it's eerie and it's kind of, you know, definitely dreamlike, and that's sort of the cosmic horror the element that's there. So what I'd like to see in season 2 is for them to start getting even, like, just weirder and weirder, and much more horror. And I think that they have kind of opened, you know, a door to do that. So but, you know, with things like The Void or Annihilation or The Thing, that's, you know, we kind of jump into it already at the height of what's going on, you know. So there's like the cosmic horror is there, it's present, it's doing stuff. And with this, it's sort of been kind of like they're trying to bring it out, right? Like that's kind of the whole goal of the show, is that they're trying to, you know, open doorways into other dimensions.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's a good, like, precursor to what else they can do.
But I mean, if you look at what you're saying, you said The Void, you said The Thing, you said Annihilation. If you throw in The Mouth of Madness, there's plenty of examples of cosmic Lovecraftian type horror, right? And with those shows or those movies, they're able to achieve that in 2 hours or less. What this show has 8 hours to do, and it has less horror in it in 8 hours than those do in 2 hours.
It's also the difference between TV and movie.
That's where I'm finding the dullness for me comes out of the repetitiveness, right? So it's that it builds itself a good atmosphere in episode 1, but then in episode 2 through almost the end of 4, it feels like it's a stagnant atmosphere. It feels very stuck at that level that it built itself to at the end of episode 1. It like was raising, and throughout a show, take, you know, Channel Zero as a perfect example. It's always my go-to when it comes to horror television. Channel Zero perfectly does like slow build, atmospheric, like tension rising that always like elevates every episode.
Yeah.
If you watch No End House or any of those seasons where it's just everything elevates, everything complements itself and takes itself to that next level. In this show, it starts to build that in episode 1, and we get that tension, we get that atmosphere, and then it just kind of flatlines through episode 2 and 3, and it just stays at that same level. I never felt a new sense of urgency. I never felt like there was things being presented that I didn't already gather in episode 1, right? So there's that lull in the middle to where it finally gets to somewhere in episode 4 where something happens. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then in episode 5, it kind of wanes a little for me again, and then it starts to rise. And then by the end, I was like pretty into it. It gets a little silly in little certain places, but I can always forgive that kind of stuff. It's just how they decided to do it. It's just, I don't know. The show was, you know, very rocky for me in its build. And that's my issue. But overall, I enjoyed it. But I did find myself, I don't want to say the word bored, but losing interest.
Sure.
Disinterested in moments where I was like, all right, we've done this. I know the neighbor. I know this person. I get where they're at. We're going to do this again. We're going to do this again. He's in
Yeah.
another dream. He's talking to her again. Like,
I get what you're
what
saying.
more
but
do we need from this? Let's move on.
I also think your examples, though, like for Channel Zero, each season is its own separate story. So they go into it knowing, okay, we have to hit all these points, the slow build.
And they should have done that with this.
Well, but I guess my argument then is that if they're planning on doing multiple seasons, that's why I'm saying I'm hopeful for season 2 for things to get more amped up. And that's how I think this would end up working, is if they kind of just increase it, as they continue to go on. If season 2 is sort of the same exact format as this season with the same, slow start and kind of not very intense climax, then that's going to be a disappointment. But I think that with Channel Zero and even with film, it's like there's a different sort of timeline for when you're going to hit those points. And if they are planning to do multiple seasons with this show, I think that could have been planned for it to be a slower first season.
But just, to me, you need to always focus on what you're doing then and there, right? Like everything, like you never know if you're going to get a second season. Right? You never know if you're going to get to complete that story. You never know any of those things. So you've always got to put the best effort into that as you can. Now, I'm not saying you have to blow it out of proportion and elevate it to a place where it's like, well, in season 2, we're going to have to bring it way back down and then build back up. But there's plenty, I shouldn't say plenty. There's not a lot of horror shows that have had multiple seasons of a reoccurring storyline successfully pull off, like builds, swells, and then able to continue to keep that tension going. Horror is usually best done in small bursts, right? Like horror movies are usually best when they're 90 minutes ish. I mean, you can do longer horror, of course. I mean, there's plenty of great examples of longer horror, but horror is a hard one to keep going for a long time. TV series are difficult with horror, and I think this show shows it for me. It's very difficult to keep. This is why American Horror Story is always, not always, but almost always unsuccessful in a season, because they try to always outdo themselves each episode, and by the time they get to the end, the audience it has to get to such ridiculous levels to try to outdo the last episode that they just botch it in the end. They've done it with almost every season.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I mean, I'm trying to think of good examples of horror shows that have had reoccurring storylines that go into the next and are able to keep that constant and arc going. Penny Dreadful
I liked Penny Dreadful.
is a great show that does that pretty well, but that isn't super horror.
No.
Like, what is a horror show that's been able to have multiple seasons of a show that has the same storyline, not a Channel Zero, right? That doesn't have the same. Even an American Horror Story does a different thing every season. Like, it's not really done much.
I mean, I think Twin Peaks maybe has, some of that where you're, interested in the same storyline over multiple seasons, but it's a very weird horror show. And I also thought X-Files, but X-Files has a lot of, kind of filler episodes that are just sort of silly or, but overall, there is a general,
X-Files is a
plot
Monster
going
of the
on.
Week show. Like
I mean,
Buffy the
X-Files is
Vampire
it
Slayer
has horror
or
elements, right? There's horror
Supernatural.
episodes, there's sci-fi episodes, it's just fringe everything.
But it's not a reoccurring storyline,
Yeah.
right? Like, yes, there's episodes that they hit back on
Right.
where they were originally going with the show, but then there's 5 episodes of filler in between where it's like, all right, we're gonna go after the Jersey Devil this week. And it's like, wait, weren't you what?
Wait a minute.
Weren't you being eaten by freaking some plant? Weren't you buried underground being digested by a plant last week? Like,
What's going
where are you going
on?
after this now? But anyways,
Yeah.
So Archive 81. Have you watched it? Are you gonna watch it? It's currently streaming on Netflix, so I'm sure you have Netflix. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Some people write me and I don't have Netflix, and I
How?
don't want Netflix, and I'm never gonna get Netflix.
Never?
I'm like, Okay.
Whoa.
But never count on Netflix for anything. So
No.
definitely not for sure we're gonna get a season 2 here.
No, I'm not gonna
But-
hold my breath, but I liked the first season.
Do you
so-
feel satisfied if you never get a second season?
I mean,
feel
somewhat.
like this
I'm like, I
ending
have questions
is
at the end,
fine?
of course. I'm like, I want to know, why and what is going to happen next with him. But I think, I think if it ended there, I would be okay. I'd be okay. I'm not super satisfied with it. But knowing that there's a, hope for a season 2, I'm like, all right.
Would it
well,
be Archive 82? What is Archive 81 anyway?
I think that must be I don't know if it's mentioned, but I would assume that that's the 81st archive that he's doing, like of all of the tapes that have been archived.
Yeah.
It must be the 81st batch.
I don't know if they say it in the
But
show,
I don't
did
know
they?
if they say it. That's just kind of what I'm guessing. But it is based on a
Podcast.
podcast, which we have not listened to.
No.
So maybe.
Let us know in the
yeah.
comments below if you've watched the show and you know what Archive 81 means, because I don't think I do.
Yeah.
I definitely don't. I shouldn't say I don't think I do. I 100% don't know. If they said it in the show, completely missed out
I
on
missed
it.
it too.
And the only thing that we did not mention is the star of the show, Ratty.
Ratty! He's the best!
Anyway, yeah, everyone's fine. I obviously I'm not super high on this show, but
I really like it.
I think it's worth a watch.
Yeah, you should definitely check
you
it
might like
out.
it more than me.
And you'd be right.
Let me know.
Bye!
Bye.